Can I eat with you? The simple question fell into the hushed atmosphere of the upscale dining room like a sudden clap of thunder, sharp, small, and utterly out of place. Nathan Cole, a man accustomed to the quiet murmur of power and privilege, looked up from his meticulously arranged, yet untouched, dinner. Before him stood a child, a girl no older than 8, her bare feet caked in dirt. A thin, tattered dress, more holes than fabric, clung precariously to her bony shoulders. Her hair was a tangled mess, her skin darkened and toughened by the harsh realities of exposure. But it was her eyes that truly caught him, weary, ancient eyes in a face so young. "I'm hungry," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Please," before Nathan could formulate a response. A voice, laced with disdain, cut through the room. "There's a vagrant in here. Someone called the cops." Another man muttered, holding up his phone like a weapon. "I already did. This is a private establishment." Unbelievable. The Mercer Grill wasn't just a restaurant. It was a meticulously curated shrine to wealth, a place where the illusion of perfection was carefully maintained. A child like this, a stark reminder of the world outside its gilded walls, had never crossed its threshold, unless hidden away as part of the unseen cleaning staff. And now, with 3 simple words, this girl had shattered that illusion, exposing the raw edges of a reality they desperately tried to ignore. Nathan rose slowly, deliberately, saying nothing. He scanned the room, his eyes taking in the sea of faces filled with judgment, fear, and thinly veiled annoyance. He looked back at the girl still standing there, still waiting. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice a low rumble that cut through the tension. She blinked, hesitant, as if unused to being addressed with even a modicum of kindness. "Maya." He pulled out the chair across from his, the sound echoing in the sudden silence, and gestured towards it. "Sit down, Maya." A collective gasp rippled through the dining room, a wave of shocked disapproval. "You can't be serious?" the maitre d' stammered, his face a mask of horror. "She's my guest," Nathan said, his voice firm, brooking no argument. Before Maya could fully settle into the chair, the double doors at the entrance flew open, crashing against the walls with a resounding boom. 2 police officers strode in, their eyes scanning the room, their hands hovering near their holsters. The one in front pointed a gloved finger. "We got a report of a minor trespassing." Nathan raised a hand, his movements calm but commanding. "She's not trespassing. She's here with me." The second officer furrowed his brow, suspicion etched on his face. "This your daughter?" "No," Nathan said, his voice unwavering. "But she's under my protection for now." One of the officers took a step forward, his posture hardening. "Sir, if she's not family, we have to." Nathan reached into his inner jacket pocket, a gesture honed by years of high-stakes negotiations, and pulled out a leather card holder. "Cole Nathan," he said, holding it out. "You'll find I've donated to both of your precincts in the last 2 years. Please give us a moment." The officers hesitated, exchanging glances that spoke volumes. Then, after a tense beat, they backed off, the weight of power and influence palpable in the air. "We'll wait outside, sir." As soon as they turned, a sudden click sounded from a corner booth. A young man in glasses lowered his phone, a predatory grin spreading across his face. Within seconds, he had typed, "Famous tech billionaire shares dinner with homeless girl at 5-star restaurant. Altruism or publicity stunt?" and hit post. The photo of Nathan standing over a barefoot black girl in the Mercer Grill went viral in under 6 minutes, spreading like wildfire across the digital landscape. Back at the table, Maya was holding the edge of the linen napkin like it was made of delicate porcelain. She hadn't touched the bread, as if afraid to even take something so small. Nathan sat down, softening his tone, his gaze filled with a concern that surprised even him. "It's okay, Maya. You're safe now." She looked at him, her eyes searching his. "You really don't want me to leave? I invited you, didn't I?" Her face relaxed a fraction, the tension easing slightly. Nathan leaned forward, his voice gentle. "Where are your parents, Maya?" She stared at her plate, her fingers tracing invisible patterns on the fine china. "Gone." The word was a whisper, barely audible. "Gone." There was a flood. Big one. Mama couldn't swim. Daddy tried to hold me above the water. But, her voice trailed off, the unspoken horror hanging heavy in the air. Asterisk, if the story moved you, take a moment to reflect on what it means to show kindness when no one else will. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and share where you're watching from. And if stories like this speak to your heart, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more powerful moments that remind us of our shared humanity. Nathan's throat tightened, the weight of her words pressing down on him. "And now I sleep under the highway. There's a bridge near the canal. It's dry most nights." He couldn't speak for a moment, the carefully constructed walls around his heart crumbling before this child's quiet resilience. All the business meetings, the multi-million-dollar contracts, the polished dinners, suddenly seemed insignificant, meaningless. His vast empire felt tiny, dwarfed by this child's raw, quiet pain. Then his phone rang, the shrill sound shattering the fragile peace. It was Kara, his PR chief, her voice tight with controlled panic. "Nathan, what are you doing?" "I'm having dinner," he replied dryly, his gaze fixed on Maya. "Every network is calling. That photo is already on 5 blogs. People are divided. Some think it's beautiful. Others think you're using her for attention. You need to leave now or at least release a statement." He looked at Maya, now tentatively spooning soup into her mouth, her movements careful, almost hesitant, as if she didn't want to draw attention to herself. Her small hands trembled slightly. She was trying not to eat too fast, to savor each bite. "I'm not releasing anything," he said, his voice flat and resolute, and hung up. Across the room, the judgment continued, a low hum of disapproval. "He's ruining this place." A woman hissed, her voice sharp with indignation. A man whispered, "Is this performance art?" Nathan ignored it all, shutting out the noise, focusing solely on the child across from him. He pushed his plate toward Maya, the gesture a silent offering. "Try this salmon. It's good with the potatoes." She hesitated, then cautiously tasted a piece, her eyes widening in surprise. "That's real fish." He chuckled softly, the sound rusty from disuse. "The realest." She ate slowly, gracefully, her manners impeccable despite her current circumstances. It wasn't just hunger she carried. It was a quiet dignity, a refusal to be defined by her situation. Nathan watched her for a long while, a myriad of emotions swirling within him. Then he leaned back, his voice raised just enough to carry through the room, as if addressing the entire restaurant. "No one should have to ask for the right to eat." And with that, the world outside the restaurant kept spinning, phones buzzing, headlines flashing, the relentless churn of the news cycle continuing unabated. But inside, at that quiet table, something profound had begun. A shift in perspective, a crack in the carefully constructed facade of indifference. Nathan didn't touch his food. He just watched Maya eat with quiet intensity, as if every bite she took was stitching something back together inside of him, repairing something that had been broken for far too long. She ate slowly, savoring every mouthful, her eyes flicking between the plate and Nathan's face, as if she still expected someone to yank her away at any moment, to shatter the fragile illusion of safety. But no one did. The police remained outside, their presence a silent reminder of the world beyond the restaurant's walls. The maitre d' stood near the kitchen, his lips pressed into a thin line, unwilling to cause further scene, but radiating disapproval. From the bar, two guests left in disgust, one muttering loud enough for others to hear. "This place is going downhill fast." Maya didn't notice. She was too focused on the food, on the warmth not just of the soup, but of the space, of the unexpected kindness. Her tiny hands were wrapped around the cloth napkin as though it were spun gold, a tangible symbol of this extraordinary moment. Nathan leaned in, trying to ease the tightness in his chest, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. "How long have you been out there, under the bridge?" She paused, her eyes clouding over. "Since July, after the storm." "You've been on your own all that time?" "On some days I see other kids, but they don't stay long. Some adults come and go. I just stay quiet so nobody bothers me." Her words were delivered without drama, without a hint of self-pity or victimhood, just simple facts told by a child who had no space left for illusions. He asked, his voice barely a whisper, "How do you eat?" She shrugged, a small, defeated gesture. "Sometimes I ask for scraps. Sometimes I find food behind grocery stores. Not meat, though. I got sick once." Nathan looked down, his jaw clenched, his knuckles white as he gripped the table. He'd sat in meetings with world leaders, negotiated deals worth billions, influenced global markets. But none of that had prepared him for this, for listening to a child describe survival as if it were just another school subject, a recitation of grim realities. The waitress returned with a second bowl of soup, her face etched with compassion. Hesitant, Nathan nodded, motioning for her to set it down beside Maya. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. She placed it gently, then said under her breath, her eyes filled with a quiet understanding, "My grandma grew up in a camp during the war. She would have wanted me to say, 'Thank you, sir.'" Nathan offered a small, grateful smile. "It's not me you should thank." The waitress turned to Maya, her voice soft. "Enjoy, sweetheart." Then she slipped away, disappearing back into the bustling kitchen. Maya glanced at Nathan, her eyes questioning. "Is it okay to have seconds?" "You can have as much as you want," he said, his voice warm with sincerity. She beamed, her face lighting up with a smile so radiant it knocked the breath from his lungs. A flash of pure, unadulterated joy that pierced through the years of carefully constructed indifference. Just then, Nathan's phone vibrated again, a persistent intrusion. He ignored it, letting it buzz unanswered. Then it buzzed again, twice in rapid succession, a digital insistent. He sighed, pulling it from his jacket, his fingers tightening around the cold metal. Kara, his PR chief, had texted. Asterisk, it's gone national. Fox wants a statement. And T reaching out. Comments are split. This could affect your board votes. Another message followed seconds later. Asterisk trending #1. Maya and the Millionaire. You need to address this. Nathan stared at the screen, his gaze hardening, then slowly placed the phone face down on the table, silencing the incessant demands of the outside world. You're famous now, he told Maya, his voice gentle, a faint smirk playing on his lips. She tilted her head, her brow furrowed in confusion. Is that good or bad? Depends on who you ask. She picked at the bread roll, her fingers tracing the lines on the crust, then asked, her voice small and hesitant. Are you in trouble? Maybe a little, he admitted, his gaze softening. Maya's face tightened, her eyes reflecting a flicker of guilt. Because of me? No, Nathan said quickly, his voice reassuring. Because of people who think kids like you don't belong in places like this. She blinked, her gaze unwavering. I didn't mean to break rules. I just wanted to stop being hungry. Nathan let out a slow breath, the weight of her words settling heavily on his chest. You didn't break any rules, Maya. They were broken before you got here. Outside, more camera flashes popped, illuminating the street with bursts of harsh light. A second news van parked across the street, its satellite dish reaching for the sky. The maitre d' approached, his voice low, trying to maintain a veneer of professionalism despite the chaos unfolding around them. Mr. Cole, perhaps we could move you and the child to our private lounge. Is more discreet. Nathan stood, pushing his chair back slowly, his movements deliberate. Number? The maitre d' hesitated, his eyes darting nervously around the room. Sir, there are guests feeling. They'll live, Nathan said, his voice flat, brooking no argument. Maya stood, clutching the napkin in her hand like it was a precious treasure, her eyes wide with uncertainty. Are we leaving? No, Nathan said, looking around the room, his gaze sweeping over the faces filled with curiosity and judgment. We're finishing our dinner right here. He turned to the maitre d', his voice a command. Bring her dessert, the good one, the chocolate torte. Sir, number the cheesecake? Yes, sir, Nathan said, his voice laced with steel. When they sat back down, Maya leaned over the table, her eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and apprehension. You don't have to do all this. I just wanted food. Nathan nodded, his gaze unwavering. I know, Maya, but you're gonna get more than that. Like what? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. He paused, considering his words, his heart aching with a mixture of anger and compassion. We'll see. She smiled again, a small, tentative smile that warmed him from the inside out, then asked, her brow furrowed with curiosity. Why are you being nice to me? Nathan leaned back in his chair, the question hitting him harder than expected, triggering a flood of memories he had long suppressed. Because someone should have been nice to me when I was your age. Maya didn't respond, her gaze unwavering. She just took his words and folded them into the space between them, like a soft pillow she could rest on, a fragile promise of safety and belonging. The cheesecake arrived minutes later, a decadent creation elegantly plated, adorned with swirls of chocolate and fresh raspberries. Maya gasped, her eyes widening in awe. So pretty. Not as pretty once you eat it, Nathan joked, attempting to lighten the mood, to ease the tension that hung heavy in the air. She laughed, a light, breathy sound, the kind of innocent laugh that made people at nearby tables pause, their faces softening despite themselves. For once, no one said anything, no protests, no whispers of disapproval, just a profound quiet, a shared moment of humanity. Nathan took a sip of his now cold wine, the taste bitter on his tongue. His phone buzzed again, a persistent reminder of the outside world. He left it on the table unanswered. He looked at Maya, her face lit by the soft glow of the candlelight, then out the window at the flashing lights of the news vans, a chaotic symphony of noise and spectacle. The world outside was buzzing like a beehive with opinions, stories, narratives, all vying for attention. Let them buzz, he thought, a surge of defiance rising within him. He was here now, at a table that had always felt too big for one, a symbol of his isolation and success. And somehow, with this small girl across from him, it finally felt full, complete, as if a missing piece had been found. Nathan didn't speak much as they exited the restaurant, the air thick with anticipation. Maya walked beside him, her fingers still sticky from the cheesecake, clutching the cloth napkin like a talisman, a symbol of the kindness she had been shown, a shield against the harshness of the world. The air outside had turned cold, the temperature dropping sharply. San Francisco's early evening mist was rolling in, damp and unforgiving, clinging to everything it touched. Paparazzi flashes burst the moment they stepped onto the sidewalk, a blinding onslaught of light. Reporters called out, their voices overlapping, a cacophony of questions and accusations. Mr. Cole, was this a publicity stunt? Is she really homeless or just part of your next foundation pitch? Who is the girl? Are you adopting her? Nathan didn't stop, didn't acknowledge the chaos around him. He shielded Maya gently with his arm, his hand resting protectively on her shoulder, and walked her towards his car, his pace determined, unwavering. His driver, Max, a man of few words and unwavering loyalty, stepped out quickly, opening the rear door without question, his gaze sweeping over the crowd, assessing the potential threats. Maya climbed in, blinking at the plush leather seats, the scent of pine and polish filling her nostrils, a world away from the harsh smells of the streets. Nathan followed and slammed the door behind him, sealing them off from the madness outside. As the car pulled away from the curb, leaving the flashing lights and shouting reporters behind, Maya sank back into the seat, her eyes wide with wonder. This is like a spaceship, she whispered, her voice filled with awe. Nathan smiled faintly, the tension easing slightly. It just has seat heaters. She ran her hands over the soft upholstery, her fingers tracing the intricate stitching. Smells like flowers. He watched her with a heavy heart, a mixture of sadness and determination swirling within him. You warm enough? She nodded, still gripping the napkin tightly in her hand. It's mine, right? Of course it is, he said, his voice gentle, reassuring. They drove in silence for a few blocks, the only sound the soft hum of the engine and the distant sirens of the city. Maya pressed her nose to the window, watching the world blur by, her face reflecting the passing streetlights. Then she asked quietly, her voice barely audible above the noise. "Where are we going?" "To my place," Nathan said, his gaze softening. Maya stiffened slightly, her body tensing. "I don't have to stay. I can sleep under the bridge again. I know how to be careful." Nathan's chest tightened, the weight of her words pressing down on him. Maya, you don't have to go back there." "I don't want to be a bother," she said, her voice filled with uncertainty. You're not," he said, his voice firm, resolute. She stared at him, her eyes searching his, trying to gauge if he meant it, if the kindness was real. He did. 20 minutes later, they reached the entrance of Nathan's building, an upscale tower overlooking the bay, a monument to his success and ambition. The doorman, a man who had seen it all, gave a slight nod, his expression carefully neutral, though his eyes briefly flicked to Maya, a flicker of surprise in his gaze. Nathan didn't miss it, the subtle judgment that permeated every aspect of his life. Inside the penthouse, the floors glowed with soft lighting, the walls adorned with priceless works of art. Glass walls revealed the glittering cityscape, a breathtaking panorama of lights and shadows. Maya stepped in, her movements hesitant, frozen by the sheer scale and opulence of the space. "This is your house?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "It's one of them," he said, his voice casual, downplaying the grandeur of the surroundings. She tiptoed in, her bare feet silent on the plush carpet, as if she might set off an alarm, disrupt the delicate balance of the space. Nathan set down his keys on a sleek, minimalist console table, the sound echoing in the vastness of the foyer. "You can wash up. The guest bathroom is over there. Take your time." She disappeared down the hall, her small figure swallowed by the immensity of the apartment. Nathan exhaled, the tension of the evening finally catching up with him. He rubbed his temples, trying to ward off the headache that was threatening to bloom, then walked to the bar, poured himself a finger of scotch, the amber liquid swirling in the glass. He didn't drink it. Instead, he looked out the window, watching the distant lights from the Bay Bridge, a glittering necklace strung across the water. He hadn't planned any of this, hadn't sought out the attention, the chaos. He only meant to give her dinner, a simple act of kindness in a world that often seemed devoid of it. But now, with the headlines exploding across the internet, with the ache in his chest growing heavier with each passing moment, he knew something had shifted permanently, a tectonic shift in his perspective, a reevaluation of his priorities. His phone buzzed again, the insistent vibration a constant reminder of the world he had tried to escape. This time, he picked it up, bracing himself for the onslaught of criticism and demands. "Carrera, I know you're mad," she said before he could speak, her voice tight with controlled frustration. "But we're in damage control mode. The photos are now on CNN and HuffPost, hashtags are trending. Some investors are calling your intentions reckless." Nathan stared at the skyline, his gaze fixed on the distant lights. "Are they? Look, if you're really helping her, then say that. Just let me script something. You don't have to lie. Just frame it, control the narrative." "I'm not framing a child," he said, his voice flat, resolute. "I'm trying to protect your reputation, Nathan. This could cost you everything." There was a pause, a long, pregnant silence. Then Nathan said softly, his voice filled with a quiet conviction. "If they care more about optics than the fact that an 8-year-old is sleeping under a bridge, maybe I'm working with the wrong people." Kara sighed, the sound laced with defeat. "I'll tell the board you're unavailable for statements. Good luck, Nathan." "Thanks," he said, and hung up, severing the connection to the world of power and influence, choosing instead to focus on the small revolution unfolding within the walls of his penthouse. Maya reappeared, wearing one of his oversized t-shirts, the fabric swallowing her small frame. Her hair was damp, plastered to her forehead. She looked smaller now, even more fragile in the vast space, a tiny speck of humanity against a backdrop of wealth and privilege. "Bathroom's big enough to sleep in," she said, her voice filled with quiet awe. He chuckled, the sound warmer this time, more genuine. "You hungry again?" She shook her head, her gaze unwavering. "Just tired." Nathan showed her to the guest room, a sanctuary of plush carpet, a bed piled high with layers of pillows, a small bookshelf filled with classic children's stories. Maya stood at the doorway, hesitant, her hand gripping the doorframe as if she were afraid to step inside. "You don't have to stay if you're scared," he said gently, his voice filled with reassurance. "I'm not scared," she said, her chin lifting slightly, a flash of defiance in her eyes. Then she added, her voice barely a whisper, "Just not used to doors." He left the door cracked just in case, a sliver of light illuminating the hallway, a symbol of his presence, his commitment. "If you need anything, I'm down the hall." She climbed into the bed like it might vanish at any moment, her small body sinking into the soft mattress. Under the covers, she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Do you always eat alone?" Nathan hesitated, his heart aching with a sudden wave of loneliness. "Lately? Yeah." She nodded, her eyes closing. "Me too." He stood in the doorway a moment longer, watching her, his gaze filled with a mixture of tenderness and protectiveness. "Good night, Maya." "Night, Mr. Nathan," she murmured, already drifting off to sleep. He returned to the living room, sank into the couch, the weight of the day pressing down on him. Outside, the city pulsed on, its lights flickering, its sounds echoing through the night, unaware of the quiet revolution happening in his heart, the seismic shift in his perspective. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel alone, not entirely. The vastness of his apartment didn't feel so empty, so cold. There was a warmth now, a presence, a flicker of hope in the darkness. Nathan woke early, before the sun had even begun to rise over the bay, painting the sky with hues of pink and gold. For a few moments he simply lay there, still and silent, unsure whether the events of the night before had been real or imagined. A fleeting dream in the midst of his carefully constructed reality. The silence in the penthouse was different this morning, not empty and hollow, but gentle and expectant, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting to see what the day would bring. He slipped out of bed, his feet silent on the plush carpet, and padded barefoot into the kitchen, the familiar routine grounding him in the present moment. He started the coffee machine, the low hum a comforting sound in the stillness of the apartment. As it hissed to life, filling the air with its rich aroma, he glanced down the hallway toward the guest room, his heart beating a little faster. The door was still slightly ajar, just as he had left it. He walked over, careful not to make noise, his movements deliberate, respectful. Inside, Maya was curled under the blanket, only her small face peeking out, her expression serene, peaceful. Her chest rose and fell steadily, her breathing slow and rhythmic. On the nightstand beside the bed, she had neatly folded the cloth napkin from the restaurant, placing it beside a cup of water, a small, unconscious act of gratitude, a symbol of her appreciation for the unexpected kindness she had received. He smiled faintly, his heart tightening in that quiet, aching way he hadn't felt in years, a tenderness that surprised him, a vulnerability he had long suppressed. He turned to leave, not wanting to disturb her sleep, but accidentally bumped the side table, his movements clumsy in the unfamiliar surroundings. A book toppled, falling to the floor with a soft thud. Maya stirred, her eyes fluttering open, her body tensing. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice filled with alarm. "I didn't mean to." No, Nathan said gently, his voice reassuring. "You're fine. You're safe." Maya blinked, the sleep still clinging to her voice, blurring the edges of reality. "I thought maybe it was a dream," she murmured, her brow furrowed in confusion. "It wasn't," he said, his gaze softening. She rubbed her eyes, pushing back the remnants of sleep. "You have food here?" He chuckled, the sound lighter this time, filled with genuine amusement. "I have a little," he said, his voice teasing. Within 15 minutes, Maya was perched at the kitchen island, her legs dangling off the tall stool, her eyes wide with anticipation. Nathan, a man accustomed to having chefs prepare his meals, made scrambled eggs and toast, slicing up strawberries into a white porcelain bowl, his movements surprisingly adept. She ate with quiet gratitude, her eyes fixed on her plate, as if she didn't want to disturb the peace of the morning, to shatter the fragile illusion of normalcy. As she reached for another piece of toast, her hand hesitating slightly, she looked up at him, her gaze searching his. "Is it okay if I stay a little longer?" Nathan hesitated, the weight of the decision pressing down on him, the implications of his actions looming large. "But only for a moment. You can stay as long as you need," he said, his voice firm, resolute, his gaze unwavering. She smiled, a full, unguarded smile that lit up her face, chasing away the shadows of the past, a smile that reflected a flicker of hope for the future. Then, suddenly, her face changed, her expression clouding over with apprehension. She looked over his shoulder, her gaze fixed on something behind him. The television, muted but still broadcasting, displayed a split screen, the images flickering across the screen. One side showed Nathan escorting Maya from the Mercer Grill, the flashes of the paparazzi illuminating their faces. The other side showed a talking head, his face animated, his mouth mouthing rapid-fire analysis. Nathan picked up the remote and turned up the volume, just in time to hear the commentator say, his voice filled with skepticism. "Raises questions about motive. Is this a billionaire's act of kindness, or a carefully staged media moment? What does it say about our culture that an act of basic decency causes such division?" He muted it again, silencing the noise, shielding Maya from the harsh judgment of the outside world. Maya asked quietly, her voice barely audible. "Am I bad news for you?" "Number," he said, his voice firm, his gaze unwavering. "The news is just bad at knowing what matters." His phone buzzed, the persistent vibration a constant reminder of the outside world's demands. He picked it up, ready to ignore it, but paused at the name displayed on the screen. Rosa Ramirez. Rosa was a former colleague, a woman he had admired and respected. "Can I eat with you?" The words crashed into the hushed reverence of the upscale restaurant like a rogue wave against the silent shore, sharp, small, and utterly out of place. Nathan Cole, a man accustomed to commanding attention, looked up from his meticulously arranged, yet untouched, dinner. Before him stood a wisp of a girl, no older than 8, her bare feet whispering against the polished marble floor. Streaks of dirt painted her cheeks, and a threadbare dress, more holes than fabric, clung precariously to her fragile shoulders. Her hair, a tangled bird's nest, framed a face etched with a weariness that belied her age. Her skin, darkened and parched by relentless exposure, spoke of a life lived under the unforgiving sun. And then there were her eyes, wells of exhaustion that seemed to hold the weight of the world. "I'm hungry," she confessed, the words a simple, desperate plea. "Please," before Nathan, a man whose life revolved around calculated moves and carefully crafted facades, could formulate a response, a voice, laced with indignation, sliced through the air from across the room. "There's a vagrant in here. Someone call the cops." Another man muttered, his voice thick with self-importance, brandishing his phone like a weapon. "I already did. This is a private establishment." Unbelievable. The Mercer Grill wasn't just a restaurant. It was a carefully curated illusion, a temple dedicated to the worship of wealth. No child like her had ever graced its hallowed halls, unless hidden away amongst the cleaning staff, relegated to the shadows. And now, this small intruder had shattered the carefully constructed illusion of exclusivity with a mere 3 words. Nathan rose slowly, his movements deliberate, his expression unreadable. He surveyed the restaurant, his gaze lingering on the faces around him, a tapestry of judgment, fear, and thinly veiled annoyance. He looked back at the girl, still standing there, waiting, her eyes fixed on him with an unwavering hope. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice a low rumble that cut through the murmurs. She blinked, hesitant, as if unused to being addressed with kindness. "Maya." He pulled out the chair opposite his, the smooth leather whispering against the polished wood. He gestured towards it. "Sit down, Maya." A collective gasp rippled through the dining room, a wave of disapproval washing over him. "You can't be serious?" the maitre d' stammered, his carefully cultivated composure crumbling. "She's my guest," Nathan stated, his voice firm, brooking no argument. Before Maya could fully settle into the chair, the heavy double doors at the entrance burst open, shattering the tense tableau. 2 police officers strode in, their eyes scanning the room with practiced efficiency. The officer in front pointed directly at Maya. "We got a report of a minor trespassing." Nathan raised a hand, his voice calm but unwavering. "She's not trespassing. She's here with me." The second officer furrowed his brow, suspicion clouding his features. "Is this your daughter, sir?" "No," Nathan replied, his gaze meeting the officer's directly. "But she's under my protection for now." One of the officers took a step forward, his hand instinctively moving towards his belt. "Sir, if she's not family, we have to." Nathan reached into his inner jacket pocket and produced a sleek leather card holder. He flipped it open, revealing a badge of a different kind, one that spoke of power and influence. "Cole, Nathan, you'll find I've donated generously to both of your precincts in the last 2 years. Please give us a moment." The officers hesitated, exchanging a fleeting glance. The unspoken language passed between them, a recognition of power, a calculation of consequences. After a tense beat of silence, they backed down, grudgingly conceding. "We'll wait outside, sir." As soon as they turned their backs, a sudden, subtle click echoed from a corner booth. A young man in glasses lowered his phone, a predatory grin spreading across his face. Within seconds, his fingers flew across the screen, crafting a narrative for the digital world. Famous tech billionaire shares dinner with homeless girl at 5-star restaurant. Altruism or publicity stunt? He hit post. The photo of Nathan standing over the barefoot black girl in the Mercer Grill went viral in under 6 minutes, spreading like wildfire through the interconnected veins of the internet. Back at the table, Maya was holding the edge of the linen napkin as if it were a priceless artifact, her small fingers trembling. She hadn't touched the bread, a stark symbol of the chasm between her world and this one. Nathan sat down, softening his tone, his gaze softening on the child before him. "It's okay, Maya. You're safe now." She looked at him, her eyes searching his, trying to decipher his intentions. "You really don't want me to leave? I invited you, didn't I?" Her face relaxed, just a fraction, the tension easing from her small shoulders. Nathan leaned forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Where are your parents, Maya?" She stared down at her plate, her gaze fixed on some distant, unimaginable horror. "Gone." The single word hung in the air, heavy with unspoken tragedy. "Gone," she repeated, her voice barely audible. "There was a flood. Big one. Mama couldn't swim. Daddy tried to hold me above the water. But..." Her voice trailed off, lost in the swirling currents of memory. Suddenly, a disembodied voice intruded, jarringly artificial in its cheerfulness. "If the story moved you, take a moment to reflect on what it means to show kindness when no one else will. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and share where you're watching from. And if stories like this speak to your heart, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more powerful moments that remind us of our shared humanity." Nathan's throat tightened, the saccharine sentimentality of the voice, a stark contrast to the raw pain radiating from the child across from him. "And now I sleep under the highway," Maya continued, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. "There's a bridge near the canal. It's dry most nights." He couldn't speak for a moment, the weight of her words crushing him. All the business meetings, the multi-million-dollar contracts, the polished dinners with power brokers. They all seemed utterly meaningless in the face of this child's raw, quiet pain. His meticulously constructed empire felt pathetically small, insignificant, compared to the vastness of her suffering. Then his phone rang, shattering the fragile silence. It was Kara, his PR chief, her voice sharp with barely suppressed panic. "Nathan, what are you doing?" "I'm having dinner," he replied dryly, the absurdity of the situation not lost on him. "Every network is calling. That photo is already on 5 blogs. People are divided. Some think it's beautiful. Others think you're using her for attention. You need to leave now or at least release a statement." He looked at Maya, who was now carefully spooning soup into her mouth, her movements tentative, as if she were afraid of breaking something. Her small hands trembled slightly, and he noticed she was trying not to eat too fast, as if rationing the precious nourishment. "I'm not releasing anything," he said, his voice firm, and hung up. Across the room, the judgment continued. A low hum of disapproval that buzzed around him like angry bees. "He's ruining this place." A woman hissed, her voice dripping with disdain. A man whispered, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Is this performance art?" Nathan ignored it all, his focus solely on the child across from him. He pushed his plate toward Maya, offering her a taste of his carefully curated meal. "Try the salmon. It's good with the potatoes." She hesitated, her eyes widening slightly, then cautiously tasted a piece. Her eyes widened, a spark of wonder flickering within them. "That's real fish." He chuckled softly, a genuine, unguarded sound. The realest. She ate slowly, deliberately, her manners impeccable despite her circumstances. A testament to a life that had known better. It wasn't hunger alone she carried. It was a quiet dignity, a resilience that defied her age. Nathan watched her for a long while, his gaze unwavering. Then he leaned back, his voice resonating with a newfound conviction, and said aloud, as if addressing the entire room. "No one should have to ask for the right to eat." And with that, the world outside the restaurant kept spinning. Phones buzzing, headlines flashing. The relentless churn of modern life continuing unabated. But inside, at that quiet table, something profound had begun. A shift in perspective, a stirring of conscience. Nathan didn't touch his own food. He just watched Maya eat, his gaze filled with a quiet intensity, as if every bite she took was stitching something back together inside of him, mending a tear in the fabric of his own soul. She ate slowly, savoring every morsel, her eyes flicking between the plate and Nathan's face, as if she still expected someone to yank her away at any moment, to shatter the fragile bubble of security that had formed around them. But no one did. The police remained stationed outside, their presence a silent reminder of the world beyond. The maitre d' stood near the kitchen, his lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval, unwilling to cause further scene. From the bar, two guests, unable to stomach the perceived disruption, left in disgust, one muttering loud enough for others to hear. "This place is going downhill fast." Maya didn't notice. She was too focused on the food, on the warmth not just of the soup, but of the space, the kindness that radiated from the man across from her. Her tiny hands wrapped around the cloth napkin as though it were spun gold, a tangible symbol of the unexpected grace she had found. Nathan leaned in, trying to ease the tightness in his chest, the ache that had taken root deep within him. "How long have you been out there, under the bridge?" She paused, her eyes clouding over with a distant memory. "Since July, after the storm." "You've been on your own all that time?" "Days I see other kids, but they don't stay long. Some adults come and go. I just stay quiet so nobody bothers me." Her words came without drama, devoid of self-pity. No hint of victimhood, just cold, hard facts, delivered by a child who had no space left for illusions. He asked, his voice thick with emotion. "How do you eat?" She shrugged, a small, helpless gesture. "Sometimes I ask for scraps. Sometimes I find food behind grocery stores. Not meat, though. I got sick once." Nathan looked down, his jaw clenched, his hands forming fists beneath the table. He'd sat in meetings with world leaders, negotiated deals worth billions, shaped the global landscape with his decisions. But none of that had prepared him for this, for listening to a child describe the brutal reality of survival as if it were just another school subject. The waitress returned with a second bowl of soup, her eyes filled with a quiet empathy. Hesitant, Nathan nodded, motioning for her to set it down beside Maya. "Thank you," Maya whispered, her voice barely audible. She placed it gently, then said under her breath, her voice laced with a quiet reverence. "My grandma grew up in a camp during the war. She would have wanted me to say, 'Thank you, sir.'" Nathan offered a small, grateful smile. "It's not me you should thank." The waitress turned to Maya, her eyes softening with compassion. "Enjoy, sweetheart." Then she slipped away, disappearing back into the bustle of the kitchen. Maya glanced at Nathan, her eyes searching his for reassurance. "Is it okay to have seconds? You can have as much as you want." She beamed, her face lighting up with a smile so radiant it knocked the breath from his lungs. A supernova of joy in the desolate landscape of her young life. Just then, Nathan's phone vibrated again, an insistent buzz that cut through the fragile peace. He ignored it, then it buzzed again twice in quick succession. He sighed, pulling it from his jacket. Kara, his PR chief, had texted, her words flashing across the screen like an emergency broadcast. "It's gone national. Fox wants a statement." And T reaching out. "Comments are split. This could affect your board votes." Another message followed seconds later, her panic escalating with each keystroke. Trending number 1. Maya and the Millionaire. "You need to address this." Nathan stared at the screen, the cold, calculated world of business crashing in on the fragile humanity of the moment. He slowly placed the phone face down on the table, severing the connection to the chaos outside. "You're famous now," he told Maya, forcing a gentle smirk. She tilted her head, her brow furrowed with concern. "Is that good or bad? Depends on who you ask." She picked at the bread roll, her eyes troubled, then asked, her voice barely a whisper, "Are you in trouble?" "Maybe a little." Maya's face tightened, her expression mirroring his concern. Because of me? No, Nathan said quickly, his voice laced with reassurance. Because of people who think kids like you don't belong in places like this. She blinked, her eyes wide with a dawning understanding. I didn't mean to break rules. I just wanted to stop being hungry. Nathan let out a slow breath, the weight of her words settling heavily on his heart. You didn't break any rules, Maya. They were broken before you got here. Outside, more camera flashes popped, illuminating the street like a lightning storm. A second news van parked across the street, its presence a blatant intrusion. The maitre d' approached, his voice low, his demeanor attempting to remain professional, despite the palpable tension. Mr. Cole, perhaps we could move you and the child to our private lounge. It's more discreet. Nathan stood, pushing his chair back slowly, his gaze sweeping over the room. Number? The maitre d' hesitated, his carefully constructed facade cracking under the pressure. Sir, there are guests feeling. They'll live. Maya stood, clutching the napkin in her hand like it was a precious treasure, her eyes wide with uncertainty. Are we leaving? No, Nathan said, his voice resolute, looking around the room, daring anyone to challenge him. We're finishing our dinner right here. He turned to the maitre d', his voice commanding. Bring her dessert, the good one, the chocolate torte. Sir, number the cheesecake. Yes, sir. When they sat back down, Maya leaned over the table, her eyes fixed on Nathan's. You don't have to do all this. I just wanted food. Nathan nodded, his gaze softening on the child before him. I know, Maya, but you're going to get more than that. Like what? He paused, his mind racing, trying to articulate the swirling emotions within him. We'll see. She smiled again, her face lighting up with a joy that transcended her circumstances, then asked, her voice filled with a childlike curiosity. Why are you being nice to me? Nathan leaned back in his chair, the question hitting him harder than he expected, striking a chord deep within his soul. Because someone should have been nice to me when I was your age. Maya didn't respond. She just took his words and folded them into the space between them, like a soft pillow she could rest on. A small measure of comfort in the turbulent sea of her young life. The cheesecake arrived minutes later, a decadent confection elegantly plated, a symbol of the opulence that surrounded them. Maya gasped, her eyes widening with wonder. It's so pretty. Not as pretty once you eat it, Nathan joked, attempting to lighten the mood. She laughed, a light, breathy thing, like the tinkling of wind chimes, the kind of laugh that made people at nearby tables pause, their judgments momentarily suspended. For once, no one said anything. No protests, no whispers, just a moment of quiet contemplation. A shared recognition of the simple joy radiating from the child. Nathan took a sip of his now cold wine, the taste bitter on his tongue. His phone buzzed again, a relentless intrusion. He left it on the table unanswered. He looked at Maya, her face illuminated by the candlelight, then out the window at the flashing lights, the chaos swirling around them like a gathering storm. The world outside was buzzing like a beehive with opinions, stories, narratives, all vying for attention. Let them buzz, he thought, his resolve hardening. He was here now, at a table that had always felt too big for one, a symbol of his solitary existence. And somehow, with this small girl across from him, it finally felt full, complete, as if a missing piece of himself had finally been found. Nathan didn't speak much as they exited the restaurant, his arm instinctively shielding Maya from the throng of onlookers. Maya walked beside him, her fingers still sticky from the cheesecake, clutching the cloth napkin like a talisman, a protective amulet against the harsh realities of the world. The air outside had turned cold, the San Francisco evening mist rolling in, damp and unforgiving, clinging to the skin like a shroud. Paparazzi flashes burst around them the moment they stepped onto the sidewalk, a blinding barrage of light. Reporters called out, their voices overlapping, a cacophony of questions and accusations. Mr. Cole, was this a publicity stunt? Is she really homeless or just part of your next foundation pitch? Who is the girl? Are you adopting her? Nathan didn't stop, didn't acknowledge them. He shielded Maya gently with his arm, guiding her through the throng, his protective instincts taking over. He walked her toward his car, a sleek black limousine that waited patiently at the curb. His driver, Max, a man of few words and unwavering loyalty, stepped out quickly, opening the rear door without question, his expression impassive, a mask that concealed his thoughts. Maya climbed in, her eyes wide with wonder, blinking at the plush leather seats, the scent of pine and polish, the luxurious interior that was a universe away from the cold, hard reality she knew. Nathan followed and slammed the door behind him, severing the connection to the chaos outside. As the car pulled away, leaving the flashing lights and shouting voices behind, Maya sank back into the seat, her eyes wide with awe. This is like a spaceship, she whispered, her voice filled with childlike wonder. Nathan smiled faintly, a genuine expression of amusement flickering across his face. It just has seat heaters. She ran her hands over the soft upholstery, reveling in the unexpected luxury. Smells like flowers. He watched her with a heavy heart, his emotions a complex tapestry of joy, sorrow, and a fierce determination to protect this child from the world that had so cruelly abandoned her. You warm enough? She nodded, still gripping the napkin in her hand, her knuckles white. It's mine, right? Of course it is. They drove in silence for a few blocks, the hum of the engine a soothing counterpoint to the turmoil in his mind. Maya pressed her nose to the window, watching the world blur by, her gaze fixed on the passing lights, the fleeting glimpses of a life she had only ever observed from the shadows. Then she asked quietly, her voice barely audible above the city's hum. "Where are we going?" "To my place," Nathan said, his voice firm, reassuring. Maya stiffened slightly, her body tensing with apprehension. "I don't have to stay. I can sleep under the bridge again. I know how to be careful." Nathan's chest tightened, the weight of her words crushing him. Maya, you don't have to go back there. I don't want to be a bother." You're not." She stared at him, her eyes searching his, trying to gauge if he meant it, to decipher the truth behind his words. He did. He meant every single syllable. 20 minutes later, they reached the entrance of Nathan's building, a towering skyscraper, an upscale tower overlooking the bay, a monument to his success. The doorman, a man who had seen it all, gave a slight nod, his expression carefully neutral, though his eyes briefly flicked to Maya, a fleeting judgment passing across his face. Nathan didn't miss it, didn't appreciate it. Inside the penthouse, the floors glowed with soft lighting, a warm, inviting ambience that contrasted sharply with the cold, impersonal facade of the building. Floor-to-ceiling glass walls revealed the glittering cityscape, a breathtaking panorama of lights and shadows. Maya stepped in, frozen, her senses overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the space, the opulent furnishings, the breathtaking view. "This is your house?" she whispered, her voice filled with awe. "It's one of them." She tiptoed in, her movements tentative, as if she were afraid of setting off an alarm, of disturbing the carefully curated perfection of the space. Nathan set down his keys on a sleek console table, the sound echoing in the cavernous entryway. "You can wash up. The guest bathroom is over there. Take your time." She disappeared down the hall, her small figure swallowed by the vastness of the penthouse. Nathan exhaled, a long, weary sigh. He rubbed his temples, trying to ease the throbbing in his head, then walked to the bar, a gleaming expanse of glass and steel. He poured himself a finger of scotch, the amber liquid swirling in the crystal glass. He didn't drink it. Instead, he looked out the window, watching the distant lights from the Bay Bridge, their steady glow a constant presence in the ever-changing cityscape. He hadn't planned any of this, hadn't sought out the attention, hadn't anticipated the emotional upheaval. He only meant to give her dinner, a simple act of kindness in a world that seemed to have forgotten the meaning of the word. But now, with the headlines exploding, the media frenzy in full swing, and the ache in his chest growing heavier with each passing moment, he knew something had shifted permanently, a fundamental change in his perspective, a reordering of his priorities. His phone buzzed again, an insistent reminder of the world he had temporarily left behind. This time, he picked it up, bracing himself for another barrage of criticism and demands. "Carrera, I know you're mad," she said before he could speak, her voice tight with frustration. "But we're in damage control. The photos are now on CNN and HuffPost. Hashtags are trending. Some investors are calling your intentions reckless." Nathan stared out at the skyline, the city lights twinkling below. "Are they? Look, if you're really helping her, then say that. Just let me script something. You don't have to lie, just frame it." "I'm not framing a child, Kara. I'm trying to protect her." "I'm trying to protect your reputation, Nathan." There was a pause, a beat of silence filled with unspoken tension. Nathan said softly, his voice laced with a quiet defiance. "If they care more about optics than the fact that an 8-year-old is sleeping under a bridge, maybe I'm working with the wrong people." Kara sighed, the sound filled with exasperation. "I'll tell the board you're unavailable for statements." "Thanks." He hung up, severing the connection to the world of corporate maneuvering and public perception, choosing instead to focus on the child who had unexpectedly sung. Maya reappeared, wearing one of his oversized t-shirts, the fabric swallowing her small frame. Her hair was damp, pulled back from her face, revealing the delicate bone structure beneath. She looked smaller now, even more fragile in the vastness of the space, a tiny boat adrift on a boundless ocean. "Bathrooms big enough to sleep in," she said, her voice filled with wonder, a hint of humor in her tone. He chuckled, the sound easing the tension in his chest. "You hungry again?" She shook her head, her eyes drooping with fatigue. "Just tired." Nathan showed her to the guest room, a serene sanctuary of plush carpet, a bed with layers of pillows, a small bookshelf filled with carefully chosen titles. Maya stood at the doorway, hesitant, her gaze fixed on the unfamiliar surroundings. "You don't have to stay if you're scared," he said gently, his voice filled with reassurance. "I'm not scared," she said, her chin lifting slightly, a spark of defiance flickering in her eyes. Then she added, her voice barely audible, "Just not used to doors." He left the door cracked, just in case, a small gesture of comfort, a promise that she wasn't alone. "If you need anything, I'm down the hall." She climbed into the bed like it might vanish, a fleeting apparition that would disappear with the dawn. "Under the covers," she whispered, her voice filled with a childlike vulnerability. "Do you always eat alone?" Nathan hesitated, his thoughts drifting back to the countless solitary meals he had consumed in the sterile isolation of his success. "Lately?" "Yeah." She nodded, her eyes closing, her body relaxing into the unfamiliar softness of the mattress. "Me too." He stood in the doorway a moment longer, watching her drift off to sleep, the rhythmic rise and fall of her chest a soothing counterpoint to the chaos outside. Good night, Maya. Night, Mr. Nathan. He returned to the living room, the silence of the penthouse pressing in on him. He sank into the couch, the plush cushions enveloping him, yet offering little comfort. Outside, the city pulsed on, its energy a relentless force, unaware of the quiet revolution happening in his heart, the seismic shift in his priorities. And for the first time in years he didn't feel alone, not entirely. The emptiness that had haunted him for so long was still there, a familiar ache in his soul, but it was tempered now by a newfound sense of purpose, a connection to something larger than himself. Nathan woke early, before the sun rose over the bay, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold. For a few moments he simply lay there, his eyes closed, unsure whether the events of the night before had been real or imagined. A fleeting dream in the sterile landscape of his life. The silence in the penthouse was different, not the empty, echoing silence he had grown accustomed to, but a gentle, expectant quiet, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. He slipped out of bed, his bare feet padding softly on the plush carpet, and padded into the kitchen, drawn by an unseen force. He started the coffee machine, the whirring sound a welcome intrusion into the stillness. As it hissed to life, filling the air with its rich aroma, he glanced down the hallway toward the guest room, his heart skipping a beat. The door was still slightly ajar, a sliver of light escaping into the darkness. He walked over, careful not to make noise, his movements as silent as a shadow. Inside, Maya was curled under the blanket, her small body nestled into the pillows, only her face peeking out, her features soft and relaxed in sleep. Her chest rose and fell steadily, her breathing a quiet symphony of life. On the nightstand beside the bed, she had neatly folded the cloth napkin from the restaurant, the creases perfectly aligned, a small treasure carefully preserved. Next to it, she had placed a cup of water, a silent acknowledgement of her basic needs, a testament to her resourcefulness. He smiled faintly, his heart tightening in that quiet, aching way he hadn't felt in years, a surge of emotion that both surprised and overwhelmed him. He turned to leave, not wanting to disturb her peaceful slumber, but accidentally bumped a side table, his movements betraying him. A book toppled to the floor, landing with a soft thud. Maya stirred, her eyes fluttering open. She sat up quickly, her eyes wide with alarm, her small body tensing with fear. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. No, Nathan said gently, his voice soothing, reassuring. You're fine, Maya. You're safe. Maya blinked, the remnants of sleep still clinging to her voice, blurring the edges of reality. I thought maybe it was a dream. It wasn't. She rubbed her eyes, trying to shake off the lingering effects of sleep. You have food here? He chuckled, the sound genuine and heartfelt. I have a little. Within 15 minutes, Maya was sitting at the kitchen island, her legs dangling off the tall stool, her eyes fixed on Nathan as he prepared breakfast, his movements surprisingly deft and efficient. He made scrambled eggs and toast, slicing up strawberries into a white porcelain bowl, arranging them with a care that surprised even himself. She ate with quiet gratitude, her movements deliberate, as if she didn't want to disturb the peace of the morning, the fragile sense of normalcy that had settled over them. As she reached for another piece of toast, she looked up at him, her eyes searching his. Is it okay if I stay a little longer? Nathan hesitated, his mind racing, weighing the consequences of his actions, the potential fallout from the media frenzy, the legal complexities that lay ahead. But only for a moment. You can stay as long as you need. She smiled, a full, unguarded smile that lit up her face, erasing the shadows of her past, a beacon of hope in the darkness. Then, suddenly, her face changed, the joy fading, replaced by a look of apprehension. She looked over his shoulder, her gaze fixed on something behind him. The television, muted but still broadcasting, displayed a split screen, a visual representation of the turmoil that had engulfed their lives. One side showed Nathan escorting Maya from the Mercer Grill, the images frozen in time, endlessly replayed. The other side showed a talking head, a cable news pundit, mouthing rapid analysis, her words invisible, her opinions irrelevant. Nathan picked up the remote and turned up the volume, just in time to hear the tail end of her pronouncements. Raises questions about motive. Is this a billionaire's act of kindness, or a carefully staged media moment? What does it say about our culture that an act of basic decency causes such division? He muted it again, silencing the incessant noise, the constant judgment. Maya asked quietly, her voice barely audible. Am I bad news for you? No, he said firmly, his voice filled with conviction. The news is just bad at knowing what matters. His phone buzzed, a persistent interruption. He picked it up, ready to ignore it, but paused at the name displayed on the screen. Rosa Ramirez. She was a former colleague, a friend from another life. Years ago, Nathan had met her when volunteering at a youth shelter, back before the IPOs and international interviews, before the world had turned its gaze on him. Rosa had run the kitchen with tough love and endless patience, a beacon of hope in a place of despair. He answered, his voice hesitant. Rosa? Her voice was firm, direct, as always. I saw the news, Nathan. I figured you might need someone who knows the real you. You got room for another opinion? Always. You're not crazy, Nathan, she said, her words a lifeline in the storm. But if you're serious about helping this girl, you can't just feed her. You need to prepare for the storm. He looked over at Maya, who was now pushing her strawberries into a smiley face on her plate, A small act of creation in the face of overwhelming chaos. She's been living under a bridge, Rosa. I know. I did some checking. That part of town, there have been reports of kids disappearing, taken. No one cares. No one listens. Her voice was laced with a quiet anger, a burning indignation at the injustices of the world. Nathan's grip tightened on the phone, his knuckles white. She's lucky you found her, Nathan. But now she needs more than luck. I'm not letting her go back there. Then you need to build a plan, Nathan. Legal, safe, secure. And keep the press out of it, before they twist her into a narrative that serves their own agenda. Hear you, Rosa. Rosa paused, her voice softening slightly. I can help, Nathan. He exhaled, the weight on his shoulders easing slightly. Thank you, Rosa. After the call, he walked back to the kitchen, his expression thoughtful. You okay? Maya asked, licking jam off her finger, her eyes searching his. I'm okay, Maya. Do you feel okay? She nodded, her face lighting up with a smile. This is the best day I ever had. Nathan leaned against the counter, his gaze softening on the child before him. Maya, would you be open to talking to someone? A friend of mine. She works with kids, helps them feel safe. Maya looked hesitant, her brow furrowed with concern. Like a doctor? Number more like someone who listens, someone who cares. You get to say yes or no to everything. She thought about it for a moment, weighing her options, her experiences shaping her decision. Okay, as long as she's nice. She's very nice. Later that afternoon, Rosa arrived, her presence a calming force in the whirlwind of their lives. She brought with her a canvas bag full of games, art supplies, and a quiet, unassuming demeanor that immediately put Maya at ease. Maya took to her quickly, drawn to her warmth and genuine kindness. Soon, the two were sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, drawing with colored pencils, their laughter filling the room, chasing away the shadows. Nathan stepped into his office, giving them space to connect, to build a foundation of trust. He turned on his laptop and was met with a flood of emails, media inquiries, legal notices, investor concerns, a message from the school board where he served as a trustee. We request a meeting to address public perception. He closed the lid, severing the connection to the outside world, choosing instead to focus on the child who had unexpectedly become his responsibility. Rosa came in an hour later, her expression thoughtful. She's bright, guarded, but open. You did the right thing, Nathan. Nathan asked, his voice filled with a quiet desperation. What now, Rosa? What do I do now? She needs stability, Nathan. Not just shelter but school, healthcare, a sense of belonging. Someone who won't disappear. Someone who will be there for her, no matter what. I want to do it, Rosa. I want to be that someone. Rosa studied him, her gaze searching his soul, assessing his resolve. Then let's start the paperwork, Nathan. She needs a guardian. And you're about to enter a system that doesn't trust people like us. Just because we have money. They'll scrutinize every aspect of your life, question your motives, and challenge your fitness to care for her. I don't care how long it takes, Rosa. I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Rosa smiled, her expression softening with compassion. Good, because it'll take time, Nathan. Bureaucracy moves slowly, especially when children are involved. But she's worth it, Nathan. She's worth every single hurdle. Nathan glanced out the window, his gaze drawn to the small figure curled up on the couch. Maya had fallen asleep, cradling a plush teddy bear Rosa had brought, her face peaceful and serene in sleep. The city lights were just starting to flicker on, illuminating the vast expanse of the skyline. She's already changed everything, he whispered, his voice filled with a newfound sense of purpose, a quiet determination to make a difference. That night, as he tucked her into bed, Maya mumbled, her eyes half closed, her voice slurring with sleep. If I'm dreaming, don't wake me. You're not dreaming, Maya, he said softly, stroking her hair. You're home. And for the first time since his own childhood, Nathan felt like he was home, too, connected to something real, something meaningful, something that transcended the sterile, self-serving world he had created. 2 days later, Nathan sat in a cold, windowless room inside the Department of Child Welfare, a place where dreams often went to die. The overhead lights hummed faintly, casting a sterile glow on the proceedings. Across from him sat a woman with a navy blazer and a face that had long forgotten how to soften, her expression as unyielding as the bureaucratic walls that surrounded them. Mr. Cole, she said, adjusting her glasses, her voice devoid of emotion. You're applying to become temporary guardian of a minor you met 4 days ago at a restaurant. Nathan leaned forward, his gaze meeting hers directly. Yes. Do you understand how irregular that is, Mr. Cole? How highly unusual? I understand it's not common, Nathan replied, his voice. He read Maya bedtime stories filled with valiant girls, gentle monsters, and unassuming heroes. One evening, as Maya, lost in her own world of color, painted in the living room, Nathan sat across from Rosa, poring over legal forms. She's changing you, Rosa observed, a hint of amusement in her voice. Nathan looked up, momentarily distracted. How do you mean? You used to talk like life was a corporate strategy session, Rosa elaborated. Everything was measurable, profitable. You don't anymore. He glanced at Maya, her small fingers stained with vibrant watercolors. I don't care about metrics now. I care if she laughs, if she's happy. Rosa smiled warmly. Then you're on the right track, Nathan. You're seeing what truly matters. Just then, the doorbell chimed, breaking the comfortable silence. Nathan opened the door to find a tall, imposing man in a somber gray suit. A badge was prominently displayed on his lapel. Mr. Cole, I'm Agent Riley, Child Protection Compliance Division, the man stated, his tone neutral but firm. We need to talk. They settled in Nathan's office, the air thick with unspoken tension. Riley opened a manila folder, its contents hidden from view. We've received complaints, some anonymous, alleging that Maya may be in emotional distress due to sudden media exposure, he began. That she's being used as a branding tool. Nathan leaned back in his chair, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. Let me guess, disgruntled investors with shaky ethics? Riley didn't blink, his expression unwavering. We take all concerns seriously, Mr. Cole. I'm here to assess the environment, to ensure Maya's well-being. Nathan gestured around the room, a silent invitation. See for yourself, Agent Riley. Riley stood and meticulously examined each room. He noted the child-friendly setup, the overflowing art supplies, the carefully curated bookshelf, the small art desk bathed in sunlight. In Maya's room he paused, his gaze fixed on the wall. There, prominently displayed, was her newest drawing. Nathan, Maya, and Rosa, standing under a house with a gigantic, smiling sun overhead. Scrawled beneath the colorful image were the words, "No more bridges." When Riley returned to the office, his demeanor had softened slightly. She calls you her safe person, Mr. Cole. Nathan swallowed hard, the weight of that simple phrase settling heavily on him. That's what I want to be, what I strive to be every day. We're not done, Mr. Cole, but it's a good start, Riley conceded. That night, as Nathan tucked Maya into bed, she looked up at him, her eyes filled with a childlike vulnerability that tugged at his heart. What happens if they say no? He brushed her curls back gently, his touch reassuring. Then we fight like in court. Yes, and with truth, she added, then whispered. I think Mom would like you. Nathan froze, caught off guard by her unexpected words. You think so? She always said, kind people shine. You shine even when you don't smile. He sat beside her until she drifted off to sleep, her small hand curled trustingly in his. And for the first time in years, Nathan felt something unfamiliar, something that transcended power and control, faith. Weeks had passed since Nathan last set foot in a corporate boardroom. Caltech Industries continued to operate smoothly under the direction of its interim executives. But today he had no choice. The board of directors had summoned him for a financial update, or so they claimed. In reality, they wanted to address the growing reputational concerns surrounding his personal life. He arrived wearing a tailored navy suit, his movements tireless despite the weariness etched around his eyes. The conference room's glass walls offered a stunning panoramic view of the bay, but the atmosphere inside was cold, sterile, and palpably tense. 12 board members sat in silence as he entered, their expressions ranging from polite acknowledgement to open disapproval. Diane Mercer, the board chairwoman, spoke first, her voice carefully measured. Nathan, thank you for coming. He took his seat at the head of the table, resting his hands lightly on the polished surface. Let's get to it, shall we? Bradford, a man known for his penchant for creating discord, immediately jumped in. We've received investor complaints, media inquiries, and internal memos questioning whether your recent activities align with the values of this company. You mean helping a homeless child? Nathan asked, his voice calm but edged with defiance. We mean exposing the company to unnecessary controversy. Bradford countered. The narrative surrounding your actions has taken on a life of its own. And what narrative would you prefer? Nathan inquired, his gaze unwavering. That I ignore a child in need because it's safer for quarterly reports? Diane leaned forward, her expression softening slightly. Nathan, this isn't personal. It's procedural. You're the face of a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. Every action you take reflects on us. Nathan stared directly at her. Then I hope it reflects something good, something meaningful. Bradford interjected again, his tone laced with thinly veiled hostility. Some shareholders are calling for your temporary resignation. A beat of silence hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Nathan inhaled deeply, steeling himself. I founded this company. I built it from nothing, and I've spent 2 decades making sure it stood for more than just profit. No one's denying that, Diane said softly, attempting to diffuse the tension. But things have changed. The spotlight is shifting. You're not just a CEO now. You're a symbol, and symbols polarize. He stood slowly, his movements deliberate and resolute. Let me make it easy for you. If protecting a child from the cold is polarizing, then maybe I've been building the wrong kind of empire. He turned to leave, his back straight and unyielding. Nathan, this could hurt you. Diane called after him, her voice tinged with concern. He paused at the door, his hand resting on the handle. What would hurt is doing nothing. Later that evening, he picked Maya up from the after-school center. She was on the swings, pushing herself gently back and forth, her hair dancing in the wind. When she saw him, her face lit up, and she abandoned the swing, running towards him, her backpack bouncing against her small back. Guess what? She said, breathless with excitement. We're doing a class project about our heroes. And I picked you. Nathan blinked, surprised and deeply touched. Me? Yeah. Mrs. Collins said we could write about anyone who made us feel safe or strong. He smiled, his heart swelling with emotion. What did you write? She pulled out a folded sheet of paper from her pocket, worn and creased from repeated handling. In crooked, childlike letters it read, My hero is Nathan, Because he sees me. He didn't walk past. He knelt beside her, emotion catching in his throat. You're my hero too, Maya. She giggled, her eyes sparkling with amusement. You don't need saving, huh? Sometimes we all do, Maya. Sometimes we all need someone to see us. Back at the penthouse, Rosa was waiting, her expression serious. She had that look, the one Nathan had come to recognize, the look that meant news. Court dates have been set, she announced, handing him an envelope. Custody hearing in 2 weeks. He opened the envelope, his gaze hardening as he scanned the official documents. They'll be tough. They'll dig. They always do. I'll be ready, he replied, his voice resolute. Rosa hesitated, her brow furrowed with concern. There's something else. A reporter tracked down Mia's old neighborhood. Someone who knew her father is talking. Nathan's brows furrowed. Who? A former neighbor claims Mia's father might still be alive. He sat down heavily, the weight of the revelation settling on him. That can't be right. Rosa lowered her voice, her eyes filled with worry. We don't know yet. Could be just noise, rumor, but the courts will look at it. If he's alive, he has parental rights. Nathan looked down the hallway towards Maya's room. He could hear her humming softly as she colored, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing around her. She said he left before the flood, he murmured. Abandoned them. That may not matter legally, Rosa reminded him gently. He was quiet for a long time, his mind racing through the implications of this unexpected development. Then I'm not losing her, Rosa. I won't let that happen. Rosa nodded, her expression determined. Then we fight harder. That night, Nathan found Maya asleep on the couch, her sketchpad lying beside her. He gently lifted her, cradling her in his arms, and carried her to bed. As he tucked her in, she murmured in her sleep, Don't let them take me. His heart broke at her words. I won't, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Promise. He sat by her side until the sky turned indigo, his mind racing through contingency plans, legal briefs, media strategies. But beneath all the noise and calculations, one truth kept rising to the surface. This wasn't about reputation anymore. It was about family, about protecting the little girl who had so unexpectedly stolen his heart. Started with a knock at the door just after noon. Rosa opened it and found herself face to face with a man in a faded leather jacket and sun-wrinkled skin. His eyes were cautious but alert. In his hand, he clutched a crumpled folder. I'm looking for Nathan Cole, the man said, his voice hesitant. Rosa studied him intently, her mind piecing together the fragments of information she possessed. James Holloway? Her heart skipped a beat. Maya's father. He gave a hesitant nod. I saw the news, saw her face. I wasn't sure, but I think I know it's her. Nathan was in his office when Rosa brought James in. The man stood awkwardly, holding the folder like a shield. Nathan rose slowly from his chair, his shoulders stiff, his gaze unwavering. She said you left. Nathan said evenly, his voice devoid of emotion. James's face tightened, a mixture of guilt and pain flickering across his features. I didn't mean to. I wasn't right in the head, drinking. After her mama died in the flood, I fell apart. I didn't think I could protect her. I thought she'd be better off without me. Nathan crossed his arms, his expression unreadable. She wasn't. She lived under a bridge. She nearly starved. I didn't know, James pleaded, his voice cracking with remorse. I swear I didn't know. Rosa remained silent, watching both men with a wary eye. James opened the folder and pulled out a faded photograph. A younger Maya, perhaps 4 years old, was perched on his lap, her face beaming with unadulterated joy. She was everything, James said softly, his voice filled with a longing that resonated deeply. I failed. Nathan studied the photograph, his gaze drawn to Maya's unmistakable eyes. You came back now because of the media? No, James said firmly, his voice regaining its strength. Because I saw her face, and I remembered what it felt like to hold her hand. I've been clean for a year. I've been trying to get my life together. And now I want to see her. Rosa spoke up, her voice firm but compassionate. That's not simple, James. There's a custody hearing. You'd need to file for parental rights. I don't want to take her away, James said quickly, his eyes pleading. I just want to know her again. Even if I'm just a picture on her shelf. Nathan's jaw worked, his expression unreadable. Let me talk to her. That evening after dinner, Nathan sat with Maya on the balcony, wrapped in a thick blanket against the evening chill. The city sparkled below, a tapestry of light and shadow. I need to ask you something, he began gently. About your dad. Her body stiffened slightly, the light in her eyes dimming. You told me he left, Nathan continued. Do you remember why? She was quiet for a long moment, her gaze fixed on the distant horizon. Then, in a small voice, she replied, he got sad. After Mama, he stopped talking. Then one day he was just gone. Nathan nodded, his heart aching for the little girl who had endured so much loss. Would you ever want to see him again? Maya didn't answer right away. She pulled the blanket tighter around herself, as if seeking comfort from its warmth. I used to pretend he'd come back, she said softly. But after a while I stopped pretending. Pretending hurts. He came today, Nathan said, his voice gentle. She turned sharply, her eyes wide with surprise. He did? Nathan nodded. He says he's been clean. That he wants to see you if that's what you want. She was quiet, her eyes searching the skyline as if it might hold the answer she desperately sought. I don't know, she said finally, her voice barely audible. I don't want to leave here. You don't have to, Maya. No one's making you do anything. You get to choose. She leaned against him, seeking solace in his presence. Will you be there if I see him? Every second, he promised, his voice filled with unwavering love. She nodded once slowly, her decision made. Okay, just once. The next day, Rosa arranged a neutral meeting at her community center. A quiet room, comfortable chairs, soft lighting, no press, no noise, just the space for them to connect. Maya sat on one side of the room, clutching her sketchbook protectively. Nathan sat beside her, one hand resting gently on her back, offering silent reassurance. James entered quietly, his eyes immediately finding Maya's. Hey, little star, he said softly, his voice filled with a mixture of hope and apprehension. Maya didn't smile. She didn't run into his arms. She simply looked at him, her expression searching, as if she were trying to remember a dream, a distant memory fading with time. You look taller, he said, kneeling to meet her gaze. I guess you had to. She tilted her head slightly, her eyes filled with a childlike curiosity. Why did you leave me? His face crumpled, the weight of his past mistakes bearing down on him. Because I was broken, Maya, and I didn't know how to fix it. I thought maybe you'd be better off without me. I was wrong. She looked down at her hands, her voice barely audible. It was dark and cold under the bridge. I was scared every night. James's voice broke, his heart shattering into a million pieces. I'm sorry, Maya. I'm so sorry, baby girl. I don't remember how you smell, she said quietly, her voice filled with a poignant sadness. But I remember Mama's scarf. He nodded, tears welling in his eyes. She always smelled like cinnamon. You do too. They sat in silence, the weight of their shared history hanging heavy in the air. The room seemed to hold its breath, allowing them the space and time they needed. Finally, Maya spoke, breaking the silence with her small, determined voice. You can come back, but only a little, she said. I have a new life now. James wiped his eyes, his heart filled with a bittersweet mixture of joy and regret. A little's more than I deserve. Later, in the car, Maya held tightly to Nathan's hand, her small fingers entwined with his. Are you mad? She asked, her voice filled with concern. Not even if I talk to him sometimes? Nathan looked at her, his eyes filled with love and understanding. You can talk to anyone you want, Maya, but I'll always be here. She smiled, her expression tired but settled, a sense of peace washing over her. And you still want to be my forever dad? He squeezed her hand, his heart overflowing with emotion. More than ever, Maya, more than ever. As the city lights blurred past them, Nathan knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be courtrooms, lawyers, questions, and perhaps more shadows from the past. But in that moment, with Maya's fingers curled around his, he felt ready for anything the future might hold. Because love, real love, wasn't about perfection or about blood relation. It was about presence, about unwavering commitment. And he wasn't going anywhere. The courthouse smelled of old paper and disinfectant, a sterile and impersonal environment. A pale morning sun filtered through the high windows, casting long shadows across the polished floor. Nathan sat beside Maya in the waiting area, dressed in a charcoal gray suit, his jaw set with determination. Maya wore a simple blue dress with a soft sweater, her fingers curled tightly around the sketch pad she had carried with her since the beginning of this tumultuous journey. Rosa stood nearby, clipboard in hand, glancing occasionally towards the hallway where the courtroom doors loomed, the portal to their uncertain future. Judge Reynolds is firm but fair, she said quietly, her voice filled with cautious optimism. He doesn't care about headlines or public opinion. He cares about stability, about what's best for the child. Nathan nodded, his eyes fixed on Maya, offering her silent support and reassurance. She's ready, he said, his voice filled with quiet confidence. She's stronger than she knows. A bailiff called their names. Cole and Holloway, Family Court, Room 3C. Maya looked up, her eyes filled with a mixture of apprehension and determination. Do I have to talk? Nathan knelt beside her, his hand gently caressing her cheek. Only if you want to, Maya. But I'll be there the whole time, holding your hand. She nodded once, her small body radiating a quiet strength that belied her young age. Inside the courtroom, the air was hushed, heavy with anticipation. Judge Reynolds, an older man with sharp eyes and a tired face, sat behind a bench cluttered with case files. To his right, a court clerk typed briskly, documenting the proceedings. To his left, a guardian ad litem, a woman named Harper, sat with a thick folder in her lap, studying everyone in the room with a keen and discerning eye. James Holloway sat across from Nathan, his hands folded in his lap, his shoulders slightly slumped, his demeanor reflecting a mixture of hope and anxiety. His lawyer, a lean man in his 50s, whispered something to him, offering a few final words of advice. James gave a brief nod, but his eyes remained fixed on Maya, his gaze filled with a mixture of longing and regret. The proceedings began. Judge Reynolds spoke, his voice even and measured. We are here to consider a petition for temporary legal guardianship filed by Mr. Nathan Cole on behalf of the minor, Maya Holloway. Also present is Mr. James Holloway, the child's biological father, seeking acknowledgement of parental rights. He looked up, his gaze firm and unwavering. This is not a trial, he stated emphatically. It is a hearing to determine what best serves the welfare of the child. The room held its breath, the weight of the judge's words settling heavily on everyone present. Nathan's attorney began by presenting a detailed timeline of events. Maya's rescue, her physical and psychological evaluations, Nathan's suitability as a guardian, and the extensive efforts he had made to provide her with a stable and loving home. Letters of recommendation were submitted, attesting to Nathan's character and commitment. Rosa testified briefly, her voice unwavering as she spoke of the transformation she had witnessed in Maya's life. She wasn't just given shelter, Rosa said, her voice filled with passion. She was given dignity, a place to grow, not just survive. Then came Harper, the court-appointed evaluator, offering her professional assessment of the situation. I visited the Cole residence twice, she stated, her voice clear and concise. The environment is safe, nurturing, and Maya exhibits signs of increased emotional security. She refers to Mr. Cole as her safe person. Her drawings consistently depict him as a central figure in her world, a source of comfort and stability. The judge turned to James, his gaze piercing. Mr. Holloway, you claim to be rehabilitated. Why now? Why after so many years of absence? James stood, his shoulders squared, his voice filled with sincerity. Because I failed her once, he said, his voice thick with emotion, and I swore I'd never fail her again. I don't want to take her away from a good home, but I want to be a part of her life, even if it's just from the edges, even if it's just the chance to watch her grow. The courtroom was still, the air thick with unspoken emotions. The judge nodded slowly, then motioned to Maya, inviting her to speak. Maya, would you like to say something? Would you like to share your thoughts with the court? Nathan looked at her, offering her a small, steady nod of encouragement. Maya stepped forward, her sketch pad clutched tightly in both hands, her small body radiating an unexpected strength. She climbed into the witness chair, her feet dangling above the floor. My name is Maya, she began softly, her voice trembling slightly. I used to live under a bridge. It was loud and cold. I didn't know when I'd eat next. Then I met Mr. Nathan. He gave me food, then a bed, then hugs. He listens to me. He doesn't get mad when I wake up from nightmares. She looked directly at the judge, her eyes filled with a sincerity that touched everyone in the room. I still miss my mom. I don't remember everything about her, but I remember she loved me. I still love my dad, even though he left. But Mr. Nathan stayed. He reads to me. He tells me I matter. He told me I could stay. She opened her sketch pad and turned it around, displaying it to the court. The page showed a drawing of a house with 2 doors. One had Dad written above it, the other home. She pointed to the home door with a trembling finger. I want to stay home. I want to be where I feel safe and loved. There wasn't a sound in the courtroom. Even James lowered his head, his heart breaking at the pain he had inflicted on his daughter. Judge Reynolds tapped his pen thoughtfully against his desk, his expression unreadable. Then he looked at both men, his gaze stern but compassionate. Mr. Holloway, Mr. Cole, I believe both of you care for Maya. But guardianship is not about potential, about what could have been. It's about presence, about who is there now, providing for her needs. He turned to Maya, his voice softening slightly. You've made your feelings clear, young lady. She nodded solemnly, her eyes fixed on his. The judge leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. Effective immediately, the court grants Mr. Nathan Cole temporary full guardianship of Maya Holloway. Mr. Holloway, you are granted supervised visitation under conditions to be determined by the court and Child Protective Services. James blinked hard, his face etched with a mixture of relief and regret. He nodded once, slowly, accepting the court's decision with a quiet dignity. Thank you, he said softly, his voice barely audible. Maya smiled faintly, a glimmer of hope returning to her eyes. The gavel fell, the sound echoing through the silent courtroom. Afterward, outside the courthouse, Maya clutched Nathan's hand tightly, her small fingers seeking reassurance. Is this forever? She asked, her voice filled with a childlike longing. It's the beginning of forever, he replied, his voice thick with emotion. The beginning of our forever. Reporters swarmed around them, shouting questions and snapping photographs as they stepped into the bright sunlight. Nathan didn't answer their questions, didn't acknowledge their presence. He simply bent down, gently lifted Maya into his arms, and carried her past the cameras. Not as a symbol, not as a spectacle, but as a father, protecting his child from the intrusive gaze of the world. For the first time, she didn't hide her face, and he didn't look back. Their eyes fixed firmly on the future they were building together. In the days after the hearing, the world outside continued to churn, consumed by its endless cycle of noise, new scandals, fresh headlines, and shifting stock prices. But inside Nathan's penthouse, the atmosphere had undergone a profound transformation. It felt softer, warmer, more inviting, like a space that had finally been lived in, truly inhabited. Maya's laughter now echoed through the halls, filling the once sterile space with joy and vibrancy. Her sketchbooks lined the shelves, a testament to her boundless creativity. Her beloved stuffed giraffe sat proudly beside the couch pillows, a symbol of comfort and belonging. Nathan had even installed a chalkboard wall in the hallway, a blank canvas where she could unleash her imagination and draw whenever inspiration struck. On one particularly gray morning, Nathan stood by the kitchen island, sipping his coffee as Maya sat at the dining table, deeply engrossed in writing something. What are you working on over there? He asked, his voice filled with gentle curiosity. A letter, she replied, her tongue peeking out slightly between her lips in concentration. To who? To me, she said, then looked up and grinned mischievously. But future me. He chuckled, his heart warming at her innocent words. Can I read it? Not yet, she said, shaking her head emphatically. Still becoming. It's not finished yet. Nathan watched her for a moment, marveling at how different she looked now, how much she had blossomed in such a short amount of time. Still small, still fragile in some ways. But there was a newfound strength in her shoulders, a light in her eyes that had been absent before. Later that afternoon, Rosa stopped by with a large manila envelope, her expression satisfied. Paperwork, she announced. All signed and sealed. You're officially her legal guardian for the next year. After that, we apply for permanency. We make this official. Nathan opened the envelope and looked at the stamped forms, the official documentation that solidified their bond. For a moment, he didn't say anything, overwhelmed by the weight of it all, the profound responsibility he had willingly embraced. He just held the papers in his hands, a tangible representation of the love and commitment that had transformed his life. She's made this place her own, Rosa said softly, glancing around at the chalkboard wall and the framed drawings that adorned the once empty walls. So have you? She made it feel like a home, he replied, his voice filled with gratitude. That evening, Nathan and Maya curled up on the couch with a bowl of popcorn, settling in to watch a documentary about sea turtles. Halfway through the film, Maya turned to him, her brow furrowed with a thoughtful expression. Do turtles ever get adopted? Nathan paused, considering her question. In a way, yeah, he said. Some people rescue them, care for them, and then set them free when they're ready to return to the ocean. She thought for a moment, her eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. I don't want to be set free yet, she said, her voice barely a whisper. You won't be, he said, brushing a stray curl from her forehead. You're not a turtle, Maya. You're my girl, and you're home. She rested her head on his arm, her body relaxing against him. And within minutes, she was asleep, her breathing soft and even. Nathan sat there in the dim glow of the television screen, the gentle rise and fall of her breath against his side, and felt a peace that transcended any stock market success or gala applause he had ever experienced. A peace that came from knowing he was exactly where he was supposed to be. But the peace didn't last long. The next morning, as he checked his email, a subject line jumped out at him, sending a chill down his spine. Urgent, Maya's story, unauthorized documentary in production. He clicked on the email, his heart pounding in his chest. A media company had announced an upcoming special titled The Girl Under the Bridge, the untold story of Maya Holloway. It included leaked photos, partial interviews with people from Mia's old neighborhood, and an anonymous source claiming Maya was being used as a publicity tool by a billionaire. Nathan swore under his breath, his anger simmering just beneath the surface. He immediately called Rosa, his voice tight with fury. I saw it, she said before he could even speak. I'm already looking into the source. It's likely someone from the shelter she passed through. They're twisting everything, exploiting her pain for their own gain. She's just a child, Nathan said, his voice filled with protective rage. She's not a headline. We can file a cease and desist, but it won't stop the whispers, Rosa warned him. If this airs, it could drag her past through the mud again, exposing her to even more trauma and pain. We have to be ready to fight back. Nathan looked down the hallway towards Maya's room, where he could hear her singing softly to herself as she built a fort out of pillows and blankets, creating her own little world of safety and joy. She can't know about this, he said, his voice filled with a desperate plea. Not yet. Let her have this moment of peace. 2 days later, Nathan appeared unannounced at the production company's office, his face grim, his eyes blazing with a fury that could not be contained. He carried nothing with him but a folder of legal documents and a steely determination to protect Maya at all costs. I'm here about the documentary, he told the startled receptionist, his voice low and dangerous. After several tense minutes, he was led into a sterile glass conference room where 2 executives sat, flanked by their legal counsel, their faces radiating an air of smug self-assurance. We're within our rights to tell a public interest story, one of them said, their voice dripping with condescension. The child's story has inspired millions. And that child, Nathan said, his voice low and menacing, is 8 years old. She's been through trauma, displacement, abandonment, things you could never imagine. She is not your content, not your source of entertainment. It's a powerful narrative, one of the executives countered, unfazed by Nathan's anger. She can be role model. She's a person, Nathan snapped, his voice rising. Not a plot point, not a vehicle for your ambition. He slid the legal folder across the table, his movements sharp and decisive. You air this documentary and we sue. Defamation, exploitation, emotional damage. You'll lose everything you've built chasing this story. You have 24 hours to pull the plug, or you'll be dealing with me. The room was quiet, the executives' faces suddenly devoid of their earlier arrogance. Then one of the lawyers spoke, his voice hesitant. We'll review your demands, Mr. Cole. Nathan stood, his gaze unwavering. You have 24 hours. He turned and walked out, leaving the stunned executives and their legal team in his wake, without waiting for a reply. That evening back home, Maya ran up to him, her face beaming, holding a new drawing in her hand. This one's us on the moon, she said proudly. Because I think even if the whole world broke, we'd still find each other. He took the paper, his throat tightening with emotion. You're right, Maya, he said, his voice thick with love. Did something bad happen? She asked suddenly, her eyes narrowing in that way only children do when they sense more than they're told, their intuition cutting through layers of carefully constructed facades. No, he said, kneeling down to her level, his hand gently caressing her cheek. But someone tried to tell your story without asking you, without your permission. And I stopped them. Her face darkened slightly, her innocence momentarily overshadowed by a flicker of anger. Why would they do that? Because people don't always see others for who they are, Nathan explained, his voice gentle but firm. They see headlines, they see opportunities to be noticed, to gain something for themselves. But your story belongs to you, Maya. It's yours to tell, yours to share when and if you choose. She stared at him for a moment, her eyes searching his, seeking reassurance. Can I write my story someday? You already are, Maya, he said, his voice filled with unwavering belief. You're writing it every day, with every drawing, with every word you speak. She nodded, her face relaxing, and leaned into him, seeking comfort in his embrace. And Nathan realized in that moment with crystal clarity that protecting Maya wasn't just about shielding her from the outside world, about sheltering her from harm. It was about empowering her, about helping her own her voice, her past, her future, and making sure that no one ever tried to write over her again. Spring came to the city slowly, tentatively, brushing its color over the gray corners, one flower at a time. Nathan noticed it most in the way Maya seemed to bloom as well, growing more confident, laughing more freely, sleeping through the night, asking deeper questions at breakfast, her curiosity insatiable. Her drawings filled their home now, not just the chalkboard wall, but tucked in books, pinned to the fridge, slipped under his door with titles like Things I Dreamed or Ideas for Us. A constant reminder of her vibrant imagination and her unwavering spirit. One Saturday morning, as sunlight spilled through the windows, illuminating their cozy space, Maya appeared before Nathan, her sketchbook in hand, her face wearing a serious expression. We need a garden, she declared, her voice filled with a sense of urgency. Nathan blinked, caught mid-sip of his morning coffee, his mind struggling to process her unexpected pronouncement. A garden? Yes, a garden, she repeated emphatically. On the roof. There's all this space up there, and no flowers. Flowers make places feel like somebody cares. They show that people are paying attention. He looked out towards the private rooftop terrace, which until now had only been used for the occasional barbecue or evening glass of wine, a forgotten expanse of concrete and steel. You know, Maya, I think you're right, he said, a smile spreading across his face. A garden sounds like a wonderful idea. The next week became a flurry of activity, a whirlwind of planning and preparation. Nathan made calls, enlisting the help of experts and volunteers. Rosa connected him with a local community garden organizer who eagerly agreed to lend her expertise. Maya drew up detailed plans for their rooftop oasis, envisioning rows of lavender and marigolds, a cozy corner for tomatoes and strawberries, a winding path of stepping stones that would lead visitors on a journey of discovery. They built it together, side by side, their hands working in unison to create something beautiful and meaningful. Maya wore gardening gloves 3 sizes too big, her small fingers struggling to grip the tools. Nathan tried to act like he knew what he was doing with a trowel, his movements awkward but enthusiastic. Dirt got everywhere, coating their clothes and faces, but laughter did, too, filling the air with joy and camaraderie. Neighbors came to watch, drawn by the sounds of laughter and the sight of vibrant colors transforming the rooftop space. Some offered words of encouragement, others rolled up their sleeves and joined in, eager to contribute to the community project. An older woman from the next building offered compost, sharing her secrets for cultivating thriving plants. A retired firefighter donated old crates for planters, repurposing them into homes for herbs and flowers. The rooftop became something else entirely, something more than just a private terrace. It transformed into a shared space, a place of collective effort, growing color, and budding friendships. One afternoon, as they planted fragrant basil, the scent filling the air with its sweet aroma, Maya paused, her brow furrowed in thought. Why don't more people do this? She asked, her voice filled with genuine curiosity. Do what, Maya? Make space for things to grow, Nathan said, his gaze shifting from Maya to the breathtaking cityscape. It's always easier to build walls, isn't it? Maya gently pressed the soil around the delicate roots of the newly planted seedlings. We're planting windows, she countered, a hint of optimism in her voice. Nathan smiled, his heart swelling with affection. Yeah, we are. But even as life flourished above them, a darker current stirred beneath the surface. The initial media frenzy surrounding Maya had subsided, but the embers of gossip and speculation refused to be extinguished. Despite Nathan's legal team's efforts to silence the rumors, fragments of her past continued to circulate, out-of-focus paparazzi shots, whispers passed between strangers, even a sensationalized article in a sleazy tabloid hinting that Nathan was grooming her for a substantial inheritance. Initially, Nathan dismissed it as nothing more than idle chatter. But then, the poison seeped into Maya's world. One evening, as she sat absorbed in her tablet, researching bee pollination methods for their rooftop garden, her face suddenly clouded over. He sensed something was wrong and hurried to her side. What is it? He asked, his voice laced with concern. She wordlessly turned the screen towards him. The jarring headline blared, From Bridge to Billionaire. Maya Holloway's unbelievable ascent. Beneath it, a grainy photograph captured them laughing on the rooftop, shovels in hand, bathed in the golden light of a setting sun. Are they saying I'm using you? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Nathan's stomach clenched. That article is garbage. It's written by people who wouldn't know love if it slapped them in the face. He paused, his anger giving way to worry. But other kids might see it at school. What if they believe it? He knelt beside her, taking her hand in his. Then we show them who you are. We don't fight lies with silence, Maya. We fight them with the truth. She remained silent for a moment. Then her eyes lit up with a spark of defiance. Can we have an open garden day? Invite people. Show them. He blinked, surprised. You want people here? To see this? She nodded, her gaze unwavering. Let them see what we built, not what they write about. The next 2 weeks became a whirlwind of frantic preparations. Maya, brimming with newfound purpose, designed the invitations bright, whimsical cards hand-drawn with vibrant colors, bearing the simple message, "Come see what we grew." Rosa, ever resourceful, leveraged her connections to reach out to local schools and community groups, spreading the word about their unique rooftop oasis. Meanwhile, Nathan meticulously arranged security, drafted media guidelines, and secured the necessary permits, ensuring the event would run smoothly. When the day finally arrived, the rooftop garden was a riot of color and sound. Neighbors mingled with strangers, drawn together by curiosity and a shared sense of community. Children, their faces alight with wonder, darted between the rows of vibrant tomato plants. A local musician, perched on a small stool, serenaded the crowd with gentle acoustic melodies. Maya, clipboard in hand, led tours with infectious enthusiasm, explaining which herbs thrived in the shade and which flowers were irresistible to butterflies. Nathan watched her from across the garden, a wave of awe washing over him. He barely recognized the shy, withdrawn girl he had met months ago. This Maya was confident, articulate, and radiant with joy. A woman approached him, her sharp eyes betraying a keen intelligence. "I'm a teacher," she said, extending her hand. "I read all about you too. Didn't believe a word of it." Nathan braced himself for the inevitable criticism. But instead, the woman smiled. "But I came here and I saw this. And now, I believe in her." Nathan exhaled, the tension draining from his body. "Thank you," he managed to say, his voice thick with emotion. As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the cityscape, Maya stepped onto a small wooden bench and addressed the gathered crowd. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice clear and strong, resonating with newfound confidence. "I used to live under a bridge. Now, I live in a garden. I didn't do it alone. But now it's mine too. And if you ever need help growing something, we'll be here." The crowd erupted in applause, their cheers echoing through the twilight air. Nathan felt a lump forming in his throat, a testament to the immense pride he felt for this extraordinary young woman. Later, as the last of the guests departed, Maya stood beside him, gazing out at the twinkling city lights. "You okay?" he asked, his voice soft. I'm proud," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "Is that allowed?" "It's more than allowed. It's earned," he replied, gently pulling her closer. She leaned against him, a comfortable silence settling between them. "Can we keep planting more stuff?" she asked, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. "Absolutely," he replied without hesitation. She looked up at him, her expression questioning. "Even if it doesn't always grow?" "Especially then," he said, meeting her gaze. "Because planting is hope." And as the stars emerged, one by one, above their rooftop garden, Nathan knew that this chapter of their story, was no longer about rescue, or sensational headlines, or proving her worth. It was about growing something enduring, something that would outlast all the negativity and doubt. And they had only just begun. The garden became their sacred ritual, a daily communion with nature and with each other. Every morning, before the demands of emails and meetings, before the chaos of school and traffic, Nathan and Maya stepped onto the rooftop and greeted their plants like cherished friends. Maya, with her boundless imagination, named each flower, engaging in playful conversations with the ripening strawberries as if they were mischievous toddlers, and playfully scolding the basil for its unruly growth. One crisp April morning, as she paused while watering the marigolds, a wistful expression crossed her face. "Do you think Mom would like this place?" Nathan looked up from trimming the rosemary, his heart aching with a familiar pang of sadness. "I think she'd love it, Maya. She would have loved seeing you so happy." Maya was quiet for a moment, lost in her thoughts. Then she said, her voice tinged with a heartbreaking vulnerability. "Sometimes I forget her face, and I hate that." He gently put down the clippers and wrapped his arms around her, offering silent comfort. "That doesn't mean you loved her any less, Maya. Memories are funny things. They hold what we need, even if we can't always see it clearly." She nodded, her face still clouded with a distant sadness. That afternoon, after Maya left for school, Nathan sat alone on the terrace, a profound sense of longing stirring within him. He knew he couldn't replace Maya's mother, but he could offer her something just as vital. A permanent sense of belonging, a legal and emotional anchor in a world that had been so unstable for so long. He pulled out his phone and dialed Rose's number. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice hesitant, "about adoption." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "You're ready?" she asked gently, her voice filled with cautious optimism. "I don't know if I'm ready," he admitted, his voice raw with honesty. "But I know I can't imagine my life without her. I want her to know, permanently, that this isn't temporary, that I'm not going anywhere. I know it's another legal gauntlet home study again, psychological evaluations, court appearances, and I know she'll need to be asked, and I will ask her. I want to do it right. That evening, after dinner, Maya sat at the kitchen counter. Her brow furrowed in concentration as she meticulously drew a map of an imaginary island where the flowers talked in melodic voices and the clouds were spun from pure cotton candy. Nathan approached her slowly, his hands nervously tucked into his pockets. "Hey," he said, his voice carefully measured. "Can I ask you something important?" She looked up, her eyes wide with curiosity. "You know how we've built this life together? The garden, the breakfasts, the late-night talks, He paused, searching for the right words. "The hugs." She nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "I was thinking," he continued, his voice gaining confidence, "maybe we could make it official. Legally, forever." Her eyes widened, a glimmer of understanding dawning in their depths. "You mean adoption?" "Yes," he confirmed, his heart pounding in his chest. There was a beat of silence, the only sound the gentle hum of the refrigerator. "Will my name change?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Only if you want it to," he reassured her. She smiled, then looked back down at her drawing, a thoughtful expression on her face. "Can I still be Holloway?" "Of course, Maya. You will always be Maya Holloway." She paused again, her voice filled with a quiet determination. "But I'd like to be Maya Holloway Cole. Is that okay?" Nathan felt something crack open in his chest, a dam bursting with uncontainable love. "That's more than okay, Maya," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "That would be perfect." She jumped off the stool and hugged him so tightly that it startled him, her small arms squeezing the breath from his lungs. "Then yes, 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 asterisk yes, asterisk," she exclaimed, her voice bubbling with unrestrained joy. They stayed that way for a long time, arms wrapped around each other, breathing in the preciousness of the moment, savoring the profound connection that bound them together. The adoption process began the very next day. Rosa, a tireless advocate, helped them file the initial petition. Social workers, their faces etched with practiced professionalism, revisited their home, meticulously assessing their living situation and their relationship. Maya was interviewed again, this time more confidently, her answers reflecting a newfound sense of self-assurance. She told the evaluator, her voice unwavering, "He doesn't just take care of me, he lets me take care of him, too." The adoption hearing was scheduled for early June. A date circled on their calendars with hopeful anticipation, but not everyone shared their joy. 3 days before the hearing, Nathan received an unexpected call from James Holloway, Maya's biological father. "Are you sure about this, Nathan?" James asked, his voice laced with a mixture of concern and resignation. Nathan was sitting in his office, staring out the window at the bustling cityscape below. "I'm sure, James. Maya is still your daughter, and she always will be. This doesn't erase you from her life. It just gives her stability, security, a name that tells the world she has a family that's permanent." James was quiet for a long moment, the silence stretching between them like an invisible thread. Then, "I want to be there for the hearing." Nathan hesitated, torn between his loyalty to Maya and his understanding of James's pain. "If that's what Maya wants." That night, he gently broached the subject with her. "Your dad wants to be at the hearing. How do you feel about that?" Maya considered the question carefully, her brow furrowed in thought. "I think it's okay," she said slowly, her voice filled with a quiet wisdom. "He's still part of my story, just not the whole story." The day of the hearing arrived, bathed in the warm glow of a summer morning. It was a world apart from the tense, adversarial atmosphere of the custody hearing they had endured months earlier. This courtroom was smaller, brighter, almost cheerful. The judge, a kind-faced woman in her late 60s, wore a gentle smile that put Maya at ease. Maya, dressed in her favorite yellow sundress, radiated confidence. Nathan, feeling a surge of pride, wore a tie for the first time in months. Rosa sat behind them, armed with a box of tissues just in case. The judge addressed Maya directly, her voice warm and encouraging. "Do you know what today is about, Maya?" Maya nodded, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. "It's the day I get to tell the world where I belong." "And where is that, Maya?" the judge asked, leaning forward with genuine interest. She looked up at Nathan, her face radiating love and trust. "With him." The judge smiled, her expression filled with warmth. "Then let's make it official." The gavel fell, its sound echoing through the courtroom. The paperwork was signed, the legal formalities completed. Nathan was handed a certificate, a tangible symbol of their newly solidified bond. Maya Holloway Cole. As they walked out of the courthouse, blinking in the bright sunlight, James met them on the steps, his face etched with a complex mix of emotions. He knelt down and looked at Maya, his eyes filled with tenderness. "You okay, little star?" She nodded, her voice clear and strong. "You can still visit, Dad, but I live here now, with Nathan." He smiled sadly, accepting the reality of the situation with grace. He turned to Nathan, extending his hand. "Take care of her, Nathan. She's special." Nathan grasped his hand firmly, meeting his gaze with unwavering sincerity. Always. That night they held a small, intimate celebration on the rooftop. Just a few close neighbors, Rosa, and a cake shaped like a sunflower, its golden petals reaching towards the sky. Maya, her face flushed with happiness, stood up on a planter box and raised a glass of sparkling apple cider. "To new names," she said, her voice ringing with joy, "and the same love." Everyone clapped and cheered, their hearts overflowing with happiness for Maya and Nathan. Later, as the stars blinked awake, painting the night sky with their celestial glow, Nathan tucked Maya into bed, pulling the covers up to her chin. "Do you feel different?" he asked, his voice soft and tender. "A little," she said sleepily, her eyelids drooping. "Like, the ground under me is stronger." He kissed her forehead, his heart swelling with love. "That's because it is, Maya. You're safe now. You're home." As she drifted off to sleep, Nathan sat by her side, holding the adoption certificate in his hands, turning it over and over. It wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a promise, a solemn vow that he intended to keep for the rest of his life. Summer settled gently over the city, its warm embrace enveloping everything in a golden haze. The garden thrived, its plants growing thicker, fuller, and brighter than ever before. Bees danced lazily between the fragrant blooms, their wings buzzing with contented energy. Strawberries, plump and juicy, ripened along the edges of the planters, their sweet aroma filling the air. The lavender bushes spread wide like open arms, welcoming all who sought solace and tranquility within their fragrant embrace. Nathan found peace and joy in the small, everyday moments, in the quiet rhythm of their lives together. He found it in the way Maya hummed softly while brushing her teeth, in the way she asked deeper, more insightful questions at breakfast, in how she always took a second cookie, not out of greed, but to save it for later, just in case. They were a family now, and it showed in everything they did, in every glance they shared, in every unspoken gesture of love and affection. One morning, as they sat together on the rooftop, sipping freshly squeezed lemonade and basking in the warm morning sun, Maya glanced up from her notebook, her eyes filled with a profound sense of wonder. "Do you ever wonder why we found each other, Nathan?" she asked. Nathan paused for a long moment, his thoughts swirling like leaves in a gentle breeze. "Every single day, Maya. I believe that the universe has a way of bringing people together when they need each other most. I think it was supposed to be hard," she said, her voice filled with a wisdom beyond her years. "So we'd know how special it is now." He looked at her, humbled once again by her extraordinary capacity to understand things that most adults struggle to grasp. "That might be the wisest thing anyone's ever said to me, Maya," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. She smiled, a radiant expression that illuminated her entire face, and went back to her notebook, lost in her world of words and dreams. It was moments like that, quiet, unassuming, rich with unspoken meaning, that defined this new chapter of their lives, moments that forged an unbreakable bond between them. But not everything was quiet and peaceful. In mid-July, Nathan received a call from a nonprofit leader who had read Maya's story and been deeply moved by her resilience. They were launching a new initiative, called Bridges to Roots, aimed at building transitional homes for homeless children, particularly those aging out of the foster care system. They asked if Nathan would consider becoming a founding donor, and perhaps even the public face of the campaign. He hesitated, wary of exploiting Maya's personal experiences for publicity. "I'm not interested in using her story for press," he said firmly, his voice unwavering. "We're not asking for a spectacle, Mr. Cole," the woman on the line assured him, her voice filled with sincerity. "We're asking for a symbol, something real and tangible that people can connect with." As he listened to her words, he thought of Maya's rooftop garden, a testament to her unwavering spirit and her ability to find beauty and hope in the most unlikely of places. He thought of her voice, which had once whispered, "Don't let them take me," filled with fear and vulnerability, but now declared, with unwavering confidence, "This is where I belong. I'll talk to her," he said, his voice softening. "I'll see what she thinks." That evening, as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across their rooftop sanctuary, Nathan sat beside Maya on the couch and carefully explained the idea, his words chosen with deliberate care. "They want to build places for kids like you, Maya, kids who don't have a place to call home." "Before we met," she said, tilting her head thoughtfully. "You mean, a place that feels like a garden, even if it's just walls?" "Exactly," Nathan replied, his heart swelling with pride. She paused, her eyes searching his. "Can we visit one first? Before I say yes, I want to see it." "Of course, Maya," he said, taking her hand in his. "We'll do whatever you're comfortable with." 2 weeks later, they visited a shelter on the south side of the city. It was clean and well-maintained, but clearly underfunded, its drab walls bearing testament to the constant struggle to make ends meet. But despite the lack of resources, the shelter was run by people who genuinely cared, their dedication shining through in their warm smiles and their gentle interactions with the children. Maya sat with a group of younger kids, captivating them with stories about their rooftop garden, showing them photos of the vibrant flowers and the plump strawberries. One little girl, her eyes wide with admiration, asked, "Is that your dad?" Maya looked at Nathan, her face radiant with love and gratitude, and smiled. "He's my forever," she said, her voice filled with unwavering certainty. The decision became easy after that. Nathan donated the initial seed money to launch the Bridges to Roots initiative. He appeared briefly in a promotional video, speaking simply and honestly, not as a billionaire, but as a father who had witnessed firsthand the transformative power of stability and love on a young soul. Maya's whimsical drawing of a blooming rooftop garden became the logo for the campaign, a symbol of hope and renewal. In just 3 months, they raised over $4 million, exceeding all expectations. But the most powerful moment came during the ribbon-cutting ceremony of the first Bridges to Roots facility, a newly renovated building that would provide a safe and nurturing home for dozens of homeless children. Maya stood before a crowd of donors, reporters, and families, holding her carefully prepared speech with both hands, her face composed and resolute. "I used to think I was just lucky," she began, her voice clear and strong, like a raindrop that fell into the right puddle. "But then I realized. I grew because someone made room for me. They didn't just give me shelter. They gave me roots. And I think every kid deserves a place where they can stop running." She paused, her voice cracking with emotion. "So we built one, and this is just the beginning." The applause was thunderous, but what mattered more to Nathan and Maya was the profound silence that followed. The kind of silence that meant people were listening, really listening, to the message she had so bravely shared. Afterward, as Nathan helped Maya down from the podium, she looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of relief and apprehension. "Did I sound too grown up?" "No, Maya," he said, his voice filled with pride and love. "You sounded like someone who knows exactly who she is, someone who's found her voice and isn't afraid to use it." That night, back at home, she pulled out the letter she had once written to her future self, the letter she had penned in a moment of fear and uncertainty. "Can I read it to you now?" she asked, her voice hesitant. He nodded, his eyes softening with tenderness. She opened the folded paper carefully and began to read, her voice trembling slightly. "Dear me, you were scared once, but you're not anymore. You have a garden now and someone who stayed. Don't forget how dark it was, but don't let it stop you from walking in the sun." Her voice faltered on the last line, overcome with emotion. "You're not broken. You're blooming." Nathan wiped his eyes, unable to contain the tears that welled up inside him. "That's beautiful, Maya. So incredibly beautiful." She leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. "I think I'm ready to write another one, for someone else, for a kid who thinks they'll never be found." He kissed the top of her head, his heart overflowing with love and gratitude. "Let's help them find their way, Maya, together." And as the stars unfolded their celestial tapestry above their rooftop garden, Maya Holloway Cole, once invisible, once unheard, sat with her father in the quiet joy of everything they had built together, not out of luck, but out of love, out of roots, and the unwavering promise that no one would ever be forgotten again. The story of Maya and Nathan teaches us that healing doesn't always come in grand gestures or dramatic pronouncements. It grows quietly, like a garden, nurtured with care, patience, and unwavering love. It reminds us that every child deserves not just shelter, but belonging. Not just survival, but a place to bloom. Not just pity, but presence. In a world quick to judge and slow to listen, this story is a call to see the unseen, to offer presence over pity, and to understand that sometimes the greatest acts of justice are done not in courtrooms or political arenas, but in living rooms, when someone chooses to stay, to listen, and to love unconditionally. It's a call to remember that the simplest acts of kindness can plant the seeds of hope, and that those seeds, when nurtured with love and compassion, can blossom into something truly extraordinary, transforming not only the lives of individuals, but the very fabric of our communities.